Hello, good morning, afternoon, and evening, and good night. But good night doesn't mean goodbye. This is Anne Phey, leadership coach, and we're coming to you with 365 paid for with Life Coach University. So this is my way of giving back, and you can give back to the community too. Because if you think any of the things that I'm going to share today will be useful, please share the information and go help somebody else in your community. And this is the way we make the world a better place. And today we're going to talk about this interesting thing called culture. So, what is culture? You can type into the chat or let me know what you think culture is. So, again, I'm going to refer to the dictionary. It says culture is an umbrella term that encompasses the social behavior, institutions, and norms found in human societies. It's also known as knowledge, belief, arts, laws, custom, capabilities. Okay, that sounds like a mouthful. So let's make it easy. So what do you think is in culture? So when you go to Chinatown, you see, that's Chinese culture. If you go to Little India, say, that's Indian culture. Or if you go to a different country, you experience a different culture. So culture, in short, just means the kind of ideas, the customs, the social behavior that a particular group of people do. So it includes the way they talk, the way they look, the way they cook, the food they eat, and the practices like the rituals or habits, right? So when we refer culture to an organization, what does that mean? So does that mean that the organization, like different companies or even community cultures, are different? So do they look different, sound different, communicate different, or they eat different things? So on the topic of eat, if you have heard about this famous guy called Peter Drucker, he says culture eats strategy for breakfast. What does that mean? Which means that if we have strategy, great strategy, we know where the company is heading, but if we have a horrible culture, we're not going to get there. So there are a lot of people who say, hey, culture is so important because why? In an organization, culture means that you have shared values and belief systems. And that impacts the way that we think, the way that we behave, and the way that we communicate. So, as you've heard from some of my previous episodes, then, the way we behave and communicate, it could lead to a collaboration or a complete breakdown. So, therefore, as leaders and as well as members of the community and organization, wouldn't we want to look at how we can get a better culture, right? So, what exactly is culture then in a corporate? And how do we get there? So, culture is important because it influences our organizational performance, right? So, if we're not communicating, obviously we can't go there together as a team. And if we don't have a growth versus a fixed mindset, then we don't innovate, right? And if we just enjoy being there with no change, then we will not be agile enough to adapt to the new future. And if we can't work together as a team, the competitors will beat us flat. So you realize that these are some of the points that we spoke about that are important to an organization, and these are what creates the culture. Now, so what is the typical stats of a company? Do we really have a good culture or not? So research actually shows that if we have a negative culture, it decreases productivity by 40%. So that means half of the work, just about less than half of the work that we're doing goes down the drain, right? But if we have a good culture, then productivity increases by 20%. So we're more effective, we're more productive, and we get more results. And sometimes that increment can be 30 to 40%, which means that I put in one amount of effort, I get 140% more. That's not bad. So how do we know what is our culture and how do we get there? So there are a couple of ways we can measure it. We do things like employee engagement survey, where we can go and tap into what people are thinking, how they're behaving, and whether they love and enjoy working there, or whether they would recommend someone to work there. So that's a way to find out. The other way is basically having focus groups discussions where we get everybody sit down and they just talk. So what do you think is the culture here? What's really happening? And actually, when we give people a chance to talk, they are able to share, right? If we have a listening ear, sometimes we don't ask, so we don't know. So when we are able to ask, that's when they can really tell us what's really going on. And we have instances where the leaders walk around the office, we call it the walkabout leader. So when they walk around the office, you're actually hearing what's really going on and getting a pulse on the company or the organization. So let's encourage that discussion, because it really tells us where we are. If we don't know where we are, we wouldn't know where we need to move to, right? So do those surveys. If you're interested to do surveys like this, I can do a free survey for your company. So just leave your contact there. I do that quite often for companies, so they get a feeling of where is, and it's anonymous. So you don't know which employee is giving you the feedback, but it does allow you to have a view. That's better than guessing, right? And also, if you don't really have an open culture where people are willing to share, then that's probably the first step you need to take. Now, so what is inside culture? And tell me, how do you measure culture, right? So culture is basically the way we do things here, in short, right? And there are four kinds of organization culture. So maybe you can listen in and see what kind of culture you're in. The four cultures, as this has been published on Harvard Business Review, so you can also go research that. One of it is the advocacy culture. The other one is clan culture. The third one is hierarchy culture. And the fourth one is market culture. So these cultures are basically the typical type of way the organization runs. But of course, sometimes it's a hybrid, you get a mix of those. And when you have a predominant culture in there, that's when it has a certain advantage or disadvantage. So let's walk through each one of them. The first one is an ad hocracy culture. Sorry, I didn't pronounce it correctly. Ad hoc, because it means ad hoc, as and when, going with the flow, plus bureaucracy. Okay, so organizations with an ad hocracy culture are essentially flexible. They don't have the bureaucracy, the procedures and policies that have been there for like 10,000 years. This is the way we have to do. You have to follow step 1A point 1.2. If you come across that kind of process, then this culture is the opposite, because it is ad hoc. So it's focused on constant innovation. So we are improving, we're going to flow, everything is open to a new alternative, everything is good if you can change and make it better. So the pace is really fast. So it's like, okay, let's go. What can we do now? Things have changed. Let's move that way. What else is happening in marketplace? Okay, we move. So the status quo is always challenged, because everything is open to a better alternative, right? When companies like these are usually startup companies, because they are new, they're creating as they go. It could also be tech companies. So like large tech companies are also, let's say we talk about Apple and Google, they are more of the ad hocracy culture. So you know that Google, they will start up a business, and if it doesn't work, they close it down, they start something else. So that spirit of innovation is there in the company. So it's great when you want to move ahead. You can start up new business, you can move the people around, you will create some structure, and then if it works, it continues. If not, you figure out another way. So this kind of culture is great when you're morphing, and it's also great to create new leaders, as well as new ideas and new products that are innovative, so you always stay ahead of the market trends. So that's the plus part. With all pluses, there are also some downsides. So downsides would be, there's no proper structure or process in place, and if we don't have that, then it's very hard to continue to sustain that. And the work pace is so fast that, people may find it very difficult to have to keep catching up all the time, because sometimes you do need some structure to ensure that there is sustainability, that things go on. Right. So if you don't have this kind of innovation in your current company, so what you could do is set up like ad hoc brainstorming groups and create a mini ad hocracy culture in your company, right? Or in your organization. Now, the second one is what we call the clan culture. So you imagine clans are like, like the Italian mafia clans, for example. Well, that's a very extreme, but clans are essentially very closely knitted groups. Uh, they could be family related, right? Like the family-led conglomerates. Usually, the leaders are all part of the family, the uncles, the nephews, the sister-in-law, and anyone who's connected to the family group works together. So they have a very strong family bond. There are the non-related family groups as well that are very strong. So perhaps um, like if you have a clan of people of a particular nationality, or you have a clan of people with a particular heritage, like the Scottish, they have the Scottish tartans because they belong to that family, right? Or tradition, but they may not be totally related by blood after so many generations, but they still stick together. So these clan associations and groups, they form together, and they are not so hierarchical because everyone's more family-like, and they are, how do you say, working together to as equals, and they feel very comfortable to offer their honest and open feedback. And there's a lot of teamwork, so there's a lot of mentorship where the more senior older ones would mentor the younger ones, and then when the younger ones come up, they will mentor the further down. This kind of culture is really great because you create an openness to support, right? But the downside of it is that it's very hard to maintain it, because as you grow, you imagine an organization that keeps growing horizontally. It's going to be very hard to manage when you grow so big, right? So the focus is maybe lost in some ways, and maybe you can't be as fluid anymore as you grow larger, and it doesn't help the company to really put things into action, because it's always friendly, and um sometimes people may avoid difficult decisions, right? So again, we can take the good parts into our community or our groups to say, hey, can we create some smaller groups where we can really look at mentoring the younger ones and really having the open discussion so that we can build our friendship and relationships, right? And the third one is a hierarchy culture. We're all very familiar with that, right? A hierarchy culture is basically like a triangle. So someone on top is the boss, and then they have a chain of command that comes down. Who's accountable to who reports to who, and what are the rules of operation? And in this culture, there's a very heavy emphasis of what's the right thing to do, what's the right way to do things, who is supposed to do what. So duties and roles are very clearly defined, and then operations can be streamlined. So you have someone in charge of finance, you have someone in charge of human resource, you have someone in charge of operations. So it's all split into, the very fixed roles. So we see a lot of that, right? In government, in banks, in your hospitals, healthcare institutions, in a lot of the large multinationals, and definitely the Fortune 500 companies are very much hierarchical, and because they need to be operationally efficient. So therefore, by streamlining like the specific roles into one, they build centers of excellence in each one. So they become more efficient, like a more well-oiled engine part. So the different engine parts work together. But the cons about this, instead of efficiency, it becomes very rigid. So you can't move. Like if a new idea comes and you want to move forward, it's like you're trying to turn the entire ship and it's really hard. It takes time, and you got to get everybody to align before you can move. So in that sense, that flexibility is not there, so you lose out on competition. You're no longer agile. So the if you're in that kind of organization, then we really need to step up and kind of like create task force, right? If you want to do something new, you need to find someone who's a change leader, bring a couple of really enthusiastic and um, people who are willing to do things differently, and give them the permission and the power to change things, right? If not, you will just be creating a team that has the ideas but no power to execute. So create the innovation in your culture. And likewise, if you're in a relatively new company without all this hierarchical structure, we can learn from them how to become more efficient, set in certain processes, create some clarity in the roles, and um, help the members to become great at what they're doing. So that's building the deep vertical expertise, right? So the last but not least culture is market culture. So what is market culture? Market culture is, you get it, like the stock market, we stay ahead. So we just make sure that there's profit, there's margins, and it's very results oriented. And the end goal is the clients. So the clients or the stock market is king. So if the client decides that they, let's say, you see this very often in fashion companies, for example, right? And like the e-commerce companies, when the trend changes, everything shifts, right? When this season comes in, let's say now the season is vibrant hot colors, right? Then the neutral shades, you gotta like quickly clear it away. So likewise, to this the fashion sense, the products likewise, they will innovate accordingly, and they will cater to the new market segments. So these are organizations that are creative. They quickly improve on their products, and they speed to market is very important, because if you're the one that's out ahead with like all these hot vibrant colors, and someone who can't get rid of their beige and neutrals, they get, you know they're one step behind, but the clients have already bought the fastest mover. So this kind of culture will create very high burnout in employees, because of the expectation of turning around. I remember that when I was in um yeah, I'm going to share some examples starting from here. So like, I remember working in advertising agency, we used to handle what we call the fast moving consumer goods. So it was literally like every weekend, you'll be running promotions. Every week you have a different flavor, you're doing a different price point. And because of the competition, the prices don't get released until the last minute. So basically you have to stay overnight in the office, rush out the ads or the promos, and then everything has to change, right? You have to go to the store and make sure that they change all the labels, all the promotional cards. And then, of course, on e-commerce, you have to change all the promotions as well. So it's a very quick turnaround, and each time one promotion has got to be more creative than the others. You got to use different colors, different promotional mechanics, and you have to brief everybody who is selling the product online and offline. So if you keep doing this week after week after week, you will burn out. And so, as like, imagine if you have this culture, it's, how do you say, people will not be able to stay long. So one of the things you need to take note of is, like, if we were to have this kind of culture, then we gotta give the employees some breathing room, and perhaps to let them take a bit more rest and then come back. So like, rest for employees? Yeah, because a lot of times bosses think that employees need to be in the office from 9 to 6. But if you're in a culture like this, the employees are not working 9 to 6. They're working at night. They're working through the night. And you can't stinge on such things for employees, because they're spending their life, burning the midnight oil for you. So give them some slack and work it into the whole human resource package for them, right? So the plus, as I mentioned, is the flexibility. The cons of such a company is the burnout. But if we want to tap into some of these so that we can get ahead in the competition, is really to pick some of the star products in your company and do a return on investment, a promotional piece, and then look at certain reasonable benchmarks of, such last minute market driven kind of behavior and products and development. So look at this and maybe make sure that we will reward the performers that are able to do this kind of work, right? So if we look at it, all four cultures have got its pros and cons. So I've worked in a startup. So like the ad hocracy culture was essentially whatever the boss wanted, you just had to do it, right? And we basically, when I was in the Swiss startup for a CRM, which is a customer relationship management model, we we didn't have the structure. So we had to write out the processes, we had to define the roles, we had to meet up with our potential clients. And there was a bit of hybrid with the market culture because we had to adapt to what the clients wanted, right? And we had to get a couple of top clients in and meet their requirements, and then we slowly develop from there. So from an adhocracy culture, that's kind of like how you grow. But the burn rate was also high because people had to think out of the box. It really stretches one. So that's why I say that if you're looking for a job, sometimes it's really great to work in a startup. It's high burn, but you literally stretch yourself because there isn't a role that's defined that says that I'm just going to do marketing and nothing but marketing. I'm just going to do what banner ads. You can't, because you have to be working across your different members of the team and looking at how you collaborate. And when something is not happening, you got to step in. And so you're kind of like stepping into each other's zone and making sure that nothing falls through the crack. So it's really good training for us to stretch ourselves. And I think I learned so much by being in a startup. And the culture was something that we all were immersed into it. And therefore, the friendship that I built in the startup is incredible. I mean, we really knew each other. We worked through the nights. We'll go out and eat, and we'll come back to the office to work. So your friendship, your work, and everything becomes blurred into a very beautiful community, right? Which is why there's a high burn rate because you're working all the time. So again, pros and cons. I'll give you an example of the Klan culture. So I think the Klan culture doesn't, how do you say, unless you have the opportunity to work in family-owned business. I found that for family-owned businesses, it's very tight-knit. So what happens is that if you're not part of the family, you could be left out. So if you're a leader in one of these organizations, you've got to do a more inclusive way to get the employees up. And also because there's so much reliance on the top area, on the leadership team from the family, that there's often a gap. So there's like very capable, strong leaders, and then you have people who are just there to get the work done. Because those that know that they have a potential to grow in a career, they won't find it in this Klan culture, because unless there's an openness to include outsiders into the management team. So the good ones normally leave, and the ones that are happy with where they are, they will stay, but they will never get to that middle management, to the top management. So there is that management gap there that I have observed with the clients that I work with. So just to be aware, to open up, be more inclusive. That's the way you can retain talent. And into the hierarchical culture, obviously I was in one multiple countries matrix structure. I report to you have a country leader, you have a regional leader, you have a department leader, you have a function leader. So at any one time, you have like 3 or 4 different bosses that were calibrating and evaluating you. So this kind of culture is also good. I would say, go experience if you're an employee, or you're looking for what you want to do in life, go work for one of these um multinationals or hierarchical culture. You will learn to understand why certain processes are important, because it helps people to keep within the boundaries and not um have compliance issues, for example. And because they are growing, so therefore there's a need to be lean, and therefore they're less extravagant compared to the adhocracy. You see startups, sometimes they whittle away money by traveling like first class, staying in fancy hotels, and dining in fancy restaurants. That's part of the culture, but it's high burn, high spend, right? But in hierarchical cultures, sometimes you end up like, as a director, you do your own admin work, right? So these kind of culture are lean, and you really learn to appreciate structure and process. So as I say, all 4 are great, pros and cons. You just see how you can adapt. Now, so what can we do? So use these different types to figure out what are the good points that we can incorporate, and if these are missing, introduce it to your team. Um, so that's where I will kind of like end this section on culture, and let's check in to see if there are any questions and comments. Okay, I have a question. I've heard how some startups tend to rely on friends and families who support the idea, but as the business grows, it starts to show the skills gap of the people who started it, and reveal that it might start to hold the business back. That's a good observation. Can you speak to what options the leader has when this happens? Great, it's a great question. Um, Firstly, congratulations that you have friends and families who support you. Not all entrepreneurs have that privilege, so that's thumbs up for you. And and definitely, how do you say? Um, Startups have a particular and has a particular skill that's required, right? Because the one that does a startup is someone who's very innovative, looking at the market needs and being able to fill the gap, and has got that passion to drive it. And that's how you manage to rally your friends and family to support it. And when a business grows, what else is required besides that idea, that passion, and that strategy piece is all the rest of the other functions, right? So for example, you need to start putting in very good financial guidance. So you really need a very strong finance guy in your team, right? And and the strategy that I'm seeing is that, before I describe all the different roles, is that the chief in command would need all the different key generals, right? Or head of departments, who can then support him in many ways, right? So finance is one of those. Legal, if your business deals very heavily in different agreements and contracting, or at least you just need one strong one to set the policies in place. You need a very strong salesperson, and you need because the salesperson will be the one going out to get all the clients, right? And you also need a very strong marketing person, because that's the person that helps you expand the market. And then your back-end operation, who's going to make sure the back-end continues. And oftentimes the entrepreneur will be off looking for more new shiny ideas, and you kind of need like a general manager or a COO, or chief operating officer, to run the office. And this person is someone who is really steady, looking at numbers, ensuring that there's a process and structure in place. The other thing that this entrepreneur can do is to get a mentor, because a lot of times it is when you have a mentor who has successfully run other businesses or entrepreneurship, that can give you the insights into what you need. because every industry is different. So if you're into food and beverage and it's your first time, it's always good to find someone who has run restaurants or food business before, because they will be able to, firstly, number one, have the context and network that you may not have if you're new to it. Secondly, they will have, fallen or failed before, so their success or failure stories are learning points that helps you to learn fast without failing, but learning somebody else how they are become successful and how to avoid the failures. So that will fast track you and avoid the pitfalls. The third thing about a mentor is that they can then, help you to get the missing pieces that you don't have. So typically, how do you evaluate your business? How do you scale? How do you get your ROI? So a mentor plus a coach, because a mentor would have a certain fixed ideas on what needs to be done. If you have a great mentor that's also a coach, you just need that one great one. But a lot of times mentors would try to give you advice from their point of view. So there is that level where you also need to integrate what works for you. So I find that getting a coach would help you to open up more ideas that is from yourself, because each one of us are unique and we have our own way of thinking. Now, having the mentor gives you the fixed and proven ways, but sometimes if you're innovating that is very different from how the industry is doing, you could actually get a coach to just allow yourself to have a sounding board on all your ideas. So then combining it with the mentor would really help to sink into how you're going to run the business. So I think those are what can help to get ahead. I hope that answers your question. I do have examples of companies that I've worked with that started to see the gap, because when you're a startup, oftentimes, unless you already have investors and you're going for your Series A or B funding, you tend to hire people who are enthusiastic that may not be the top-notch market and experienced professionals, because it would be very difficult to move them from their well-paid jobs, right? And sometimes we end up with the more enthusiastic, younger, less experienced group of employees. And if that's the case, then sometimes they may not have some of the skills to enable you to scale. So you do at some point in time have to consider that if there are certain skills gap within your team as well, is to hire someone who can come to beef up the skills. So for example, let's say if you're trying to manage the supply, or if you're in a service line, you're trying to manage the people who are providing the service to your clients. And maybe in the initial period, you just need someone who's doing the coordination. But at some point in time, when you're growing, you need better quality service providers. So that's when you need someone who can attract the right talents for you. So you need to hire someone who has the ability to speak their language, who understands your backend service providers, and whom the service providers will respect and be persuaded to move over to support you and to raise their level of playing game. So we adapt right along the way. So it's important to watch where the skills gaps are. Yeah. Thank you. I know my answer is very long, but since this question has been raised, I'll answer in different aspects. I hope that does it. All right. So we're at almost at the, oh, awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna read up this comment. I hope you don't mind. My son loves your pay it forward sessions. You've got a great fan. Thank you. Well, these days people are growing up, and I actually think that entrepreneurs can start from a young age. You know, even at the age of 6 or 7, you can start creating new business. Um, so I'm going to run over time today, but I will share something. When I was 8 years old, that's kind of like, yeah. So when I was 8 years old, I created a club in school, and I got my partners. I had two other partners, so it was a trio. We call ourselves the triple tree. And we brought stuff from our home, and we brought it to school to sell for as a second hand to students um, who may not have the budget to buy new things. And we also saw the gap in the marketplace where, you know, sometimes you buy snacks and it comes with a toy. So we bought a whole bunch of those, and we split them up, and we sold the toys separately and the and the snacks separately. And people started buying because some people just wanted the snacks, some people wanted the toys. So we made a lot of money, but it wasn't for profit. You know, I was going to donate this towards like a community club, so all of us could go out after school to help the less fortunate kids. But unfortunately, my school didn't recognize this entrepreneurship. They said, no, no selling, no commercial activities in school. Come on, I'm an 8-year-old. And basically, they made me, well, they shamed me in front of the whole school. They made me stand in front of the entire school assembly, and basically was a bad example of doing business in school. But these days, hopefully, the culture is much better. That's why I talk about culture, because even the school culture matters, right? If the school had an ad hocracy culture that emphasized innovation, or a market culture that really saw that there was a need there, and this student had actually created an idea that made money, they would have applauded that. So if your son or your younger ones at home are starting to become entrepreneurs with great ideas, encourage them, because these days it's no longer about age, but it's about your idea and how you can take it out. Yeah. So, oh, thank you for putting another comment. My son is 7 years old and has been listening to your paid forward talks every day. He has taken lots of action. He has since created a jewelry making business called Kids Make Company. He has made 18 pounds in an hour. Thank you, Anne. Oh my God, I'm so encouraged. So he's already gone ahead. Wow, this is a talent that can be nurtured. I'm so proud of your son, of you and your son, because obviously you have given a good how do you say, good parenting and nurturing to allow this talent to come forth. So I'm super excited. So now he can, I think he's probably in the ad hocracy culture, and if he can tune into the market culture by looking at what kind of jewelry design that the market needs and wants, and go according to that, then the more sales will come in. And I will look forward to him becoming and building his process and structure and growing. This is such an encouragement. I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right. I am seriously running over time. So I really thank you. Oh, there's one more. Um, okay, I think this one has been answered. All right. Let me see if there's any other open questions. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is a privilege, you know, for me to share. And um, I truthfully say this because it's not, it's sometimes we take our speech and communication and ability to share for granted, because there are voices that sometimes are not heard. And the fact that we can share, like me just sharing and paying it forward, it's a privilege. And all of you here listening, it's a privilege to even be able to listen to what someone else has to say. And for me, it is a gift back to me. to be heard and that someone is able to benefit. So perhaps for this today's Pay It Forward, we could give a listening ear to somebody else. And I think that would really make that day. So until tomorrow, let me know what you'd like to hear on Pay It Forward for leadership lessons from the boss from hell to heaven. I'm Anne Phey, leadership coach, and this is 365 Pay It Forward with Life Coach University. So see you again tomorrow. Bye.